Hail, and welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to be discussing Ouija boards, or Ouija boards, or however you pronounce it. It seems that various people have various different methods and ways of pronouncing this. I personally just refer to it as a Ouija board. So I will be referring to it as a Ouija board throughout the video, or the Ouija for short. So, it is a article, a piece of occult equipment, if you will, a tool that is actually very famous, very infamous. I highly doubt that any of you who are watching this video have not, in any way, shape, or form, ever heard previously of a Ouija board. I find it also very hard to believe that, none of you have, or that some of you may not have heard any horror stories, fictional or factual or perceived to be factual regarding a Ouija board, because it is something that is obviously in a lot of modern day media, such as in horror movies, in certain TV shows which deals with the occult, with magic, that you have not, in some way, shape, or form heard about the horrors and the dangers and the evils of the Ouija board, and what could possibly come to pass if you ever decide to sit down one day and to mess with it. I am here to both debunk and to reinforce those ideas. Of course, if you are new to my channel, because I'm aware that a topic like this may perhaps draw in some individuals who are not into magic, not specifically into the practice of self-development through spirituality in that sense, who may not practice magic, who may not be an active member of the quote-unquote occult. I, however, am, as you may notice if you scroll through my channel, if you take a look at some of the various materials I have to offer. If you are new to my channel, welcome, and thank you for tuning in. So, I'm going to be coming at this from a perspective that is a shamanic perspective, eclectic pagan perspective, because I am eclectic pagan, for those of you that don't know. I do not have an Abrahamic faith, an Abrahamic conviction, for various reasons, which is outlined in various other videos throughout my channel. So you will not hear talk of, Christianity or, that sort of thing in the light that you would normally hear it from in the more mainstream expression of spirituality and things surrounding the occult and surrounding Ouija boards in particular. So with that out of the way, I'd like to get started on this particular topic. So what is a Ouija board? Well, I do think, like I said, that the Ouija board needs no introduction in and of itself. We all pretty much know what it looks like, and if you don't, one quick Google search is all you will need to get to know what it is exactly. It is usually a rectangular shaped board, although it is my understanding that Ouija boards come in various renditions and various variations in shape, in how they are portrayed, the artwork on it, the colors that they use, the materials that they use. But usually what you will find is a rectangular board that is made of wood or cardboard in some way, shape, or form. Perhaps some of them may be made of plastic, but they will always feature the same couple of things, and that is the entire alphabet in alphabetical order. Usually that will be at the center of the board, although again, like I said, different renditions exist. And this will obviously go from A to Z, like I said, in alphabetical order. It will usually feature numbers from 1 through 0. That is to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and then, of course, 0 at the end. And you will often have yes, no, and goodbye displayed on it. The words yes, no, and goodbye. So we will be getting into what all these functions and writings and letters and numbers are for. But that is basically, a rough layout of the Ouija board itself. It will feature artwork, it will feature the entire alphabet, it will feature all numbers in our numerical system. It will feature yes, no, and goodbye, just to reiterate. So what it will also usually have is a planchette, which is usually a little, plank of wood or cardboard, plastic that looks like a heart shape or like a reverse heart shaped point or pointer, if you will. And usually it will have like a pencil hole in it or like a hole through which you can see or something along those lines. The pencil hole will be for automatic writing because that is something I will be getting into a bit later. Although that will not be the specific focus of this particular video, because what I will mostly be addressing, FYI, is the main function through which for which it is usually used, which are seances or contacting the spirit realms, basically. But anyway, more on that stuff later. The planchette will have usually like a little roller or like wheels or some other sort of like thing which elevates the planchette above the rest of the board, which will make it easier for the planchette to move around, because that is, of course, if you know a little bit about this, part of the idea that you and your buddies or your co-practitioners in more serious circumstances, that you will place your hands on the planchette and that the spirit, or so the saying goes, and in my opinion, there is indeed something to that. It is a little more complicated than just that, but they will. It will move the planchette around. It will spell out words. It will spell out names, or it will give dates through the numbers. For example, so if you ask a deceased person that you are contacting through the Ouija board, what year did you die? It will spell out 1970. So 1970. Okay, so this person died in 1970. Did you die in BCE or did you die in CE? And then it will spell out CE, because I mean, it is possible, although highly unlikely, that a spirit has been around for what is it now, roughly, for several thousand years. It is obviously not going to be very likely that such a person has just stuck around as a spirit for that long. I mean, I personally believe in reincarnation, so whatever your own personal religious beliefs are in that regard. Basically, the point is the point of a Ouija board is mainly to communicate with the dead or communicate with other spirits, to contact perhaps deceased loved ones, to contact perhaps spirit guides or protector spirits or ancestors, or maybe even, I don't know if you're into that sort of thing, angelic beings, or some people may use it to contact quote-unquote demonic beings. Now, I should be clear, I am a pagan. I am particularly someone who works with the Norse Germanic pantheon, but that is to say, Odin, Frey, Freya, Thor, Balder, those kinds of deities. So I will also work with other deities from, say, the Egyptian pantheon, from the Greek pantheon, stuff like that. So I don't really have limits as to what I will work with, who I will work with, etc. A demon, to me, can mean either one of two things. Now, in the occult, in the in the world of us practitioners, magicians, shamans, stuff like that, you will find that a quote-unquote demon is often what is used as a kind of a rejectionary label. That is to say that a pagan will work with beings such as Pan is a very famous example, of course, the Greek god Pan, who was originally a god of lust, sexuality, among other things and stuff like that, which the Abrahamic religions have frankly vilified. So that is one possible meaning of a demon. To say that Pan is a demon because he has the horns and the whole satyr look and stuff like that going on. A lot of people who are of Abrahamic persuasions would refer to Pan as being a demon because he classically looks like this, and he presides over his sexuality, and in a lot of Christian denominations, sexuality is of course seen as something evil, outside of marriage, outside of wedlock, and outside of specific purposes. I am aware, of course, that this varies. I was at one point a Christian, but and the thing is, of course, that a lot of these ancient pagan deities have been misnomered as demons, as opposers of Yahweh, the Christian God, or God the Father. So this is, of course, kind of a smear campaign that has been going on. So I imagine that certain individuals, myself excluded, because I think it's a little silly to refer to such beings as demons when in fact they are just pagan gods to me, that they refer to them as demons as a way to rebel against their Christian past, if you will, or as perhaps as a matter of flipping off the Abrahamic traditions and those that believe in them. My personal definition of the word demon would be a spirit that is willfully malicious towards a specific species. For example, astral parasites, in my definition, would count as a demon, even though in many cases such beings are just feeding, but they are in direct conflict with our species. So I would label them because they are spirits, and that is kind of the whole idea that the word has attached to it, that it's an adversarial spirit. That is something that I would call quote unquote a demon. It is an opposing force. It is something that is not to our benefit. So that is my personal definition. A demon is a malicious spirit or entity that is in direct conflict with either you or the species at large. And so, yeah, I will get more into that in a different video at some point, although I don't really feel that it is a very pressing matter, because I think the word demon has such a loaded charge to it, and it is just something that I do not find, it is something that I use within my own group of practitioners for specific kinds of beings, and I think that when I use it for these people, they know what I'm talking about, but the boundaries between such definitions are of course going to become increasingly obscured the more people you talk to. So it is something that is really just an individual interpretation and definition that I use in that manner, in that sense. But I also understand, of course, for the other party that says, hey, I call my old pagan gods demons just to, be edgy and rebel, basically. And I say that with all due respect, because I am aware that for some people the psyche, which is so very important in magic, of course, in the application of will, that they utilize those terms for that purpose. So, regardless, that is my little rant on demons. Back to Ouija boards. So the Ouija board has a very poor, very bad reputation, often associated with, like I said, demonic, quote-unquote, entities, negative entities, other forms of malicious spirits who may or may not be out to deceive, hapless teenagers, like you so often see in TV shows or movies, to lure them into, damnation, or to possess them, to overtake them, to make them do atrocious things to their friends and family, because that is, of course, the start of many horror movie, particularly those that deal with an antagonist of a paranormal nature, of a supernatural nature, such as a vengeful ghost or other kind of negative entity that comes through the board and first pretends to be nice and then draws in the teenager, like the easily easily convinced teenager that may be a little mentally unstable, or a little dim-witted in some cases. I mean, I always have the question, what kind of individual would just haplessly take the word of a spirit, without any sort of proof? I mean, just because a spirit tells you something, it is automatically right, it is automatically accurate. This is one thing that I will be getting into, of course, as well. Now, of course, this whole image that popular media has portrayed about the Ouija board is, as mentioned a little bit earlier, as discussed, as brought up, the Abrahamic religions, Islam, particularly Christianity, and of course a little Judaism as well, but particularly in our Western society, Christianity in its various forms, its various denominations, has done a very quote-unquote great job of vilifying what essentially amounts to a communication tool in the right hands, and a complete clusterfuck and a random portal opener to the nether realms in naive or stupid hands, So it depends a little bit. It's basically like a knife or a gun. That is basically my personal stance on it. A Ouija board, pretty much like anything in magic, is a occult spiritual knife or a weapon of some sort that you can either use in self-defense, you can use it to, I don't know, defend yourself, you can use it also to kill innocent people that have done you absolutely no wrong. You know, it really does depend on how you use it. But, you know, there are, of course, many stories out there that, you know, I have no doubt that they are authentic. I mean, I have known people who have messed around with such a board, who told me stories about certain things regarding the Ouija board, how they said that certain friends were completely, you know, scratched all over, or they were assaulted by an unseen force, and that have kick-started hauntings in somebody's house, that have kick-started the haunting of a particular person, which, by the way, is a video I have actually planned. Hauntings, how to know if I'm haunted, how to know if my house is haunted, stuff like that, because I have dealt with hauntings before I took up magic, before I started following the path I currently walk. I had a lot of, shall we say, interesting things happen to me throughout my childhood, which had both to do with the houses I lived in certain cases, and in certain cases it turned out to be me and or a family member that had been haunted by a particular force that for some reason was at the time still attached to me. So more on that in a different video, of course. But yeah, no, I have heard so many stories, and some of them are quite clearly exaggerated. Some of them are quite clearly Christian propaganda. Some of them are quite clearly, you know, just distraught beings who really want to voice their concerns, voice their experiences, and, you know, give themselves an outlet. And of course, there are those who just feel like, you know, being an enchanting storyteller, who may want to just work with this kind of material, who just feel the need to, you know, write an interesting story and perhaps see how many people they can convince, you know, because that is, of course, always a possibility, and you're going to find that with pretty much everything. So, you know, I have no doubt, like I said, that some of these stories are absolutely fake and some of these are absolutely true. So, you know, I mean, I do find myself very well aware of the dangers of the Ouija board. I have not, you know, I don't really feel the need to work with it personally. However, I do understand that some of you may feel the need to work with it, and I am basically going to be offering you a brief 101 how-to guide on how to safely work with a Ouija board. So if that is something that is of interest to you, please continue watching. It will be all the way at the end. But I do feel that it is, well, somewhat necessary. I mean, I hate to use the word necessary, but recommended that you do listen to everything else I have to say before I outline these steps, so that you can decide for yourself, based on what I have to say, and perhaps, of course, based on what others have to say, on whether you think it is right for you to work with. Because I do personally feel, as someone who uses different divination methods. For example, if you look at my channel, I am striving to be a rune master, which I'm only 4 runes away from at this point. But I work with the Elder Fufag runes, which is an ancient runic alphabet from the very early centuries of our current, well, calendar of the CE or the AD, if you are so inclined, years, from the ancient Germanic tribes, and that is something that I feel personally very comfortable with, because of the gods that I walk with, I should say, that I work with and that I walk with. So someone else may find the tarot to be very, you know, very enthralling, very inviting. I have worked with tarot, and I don't care for it. I'll be honest. It just doesn't resonate with me. I work with pendulums. I work with a variety of other divination methods, such as black mirrors. I have one of those, and I think they're great. I've worked with crystal balls. I've worked with you know, all that sort of stuff, and I've worked with water divination here and there a little bit. Although I do aim to be getting into that a little further at some point. considering the rune that I'm currently working with is Lagus, which is the rune of water, of course. And well, I say of course, but not everybody will know that. So that is something that I also do want to want you to consider. You may have a curiosity about the Ouija board, but you may find that it's just either underwhelming, that it's maybe overwhelming, that you find the way that the Ouija board functions to be incompatible with your own psyche. You may find it intimidating, scary, whatever, and that's fine. I mean, we all have our personal preferences and our preferred methods of communication with the spirit realms, and that is, as I said, fine. It is perfectly acceptable. One person sees spirits, the other hears spirits, another person may just feel them around, another person may channel spirits, such as the case with a medium, or another person does something else. Some people channel spirits through art, like they just draw stuff and then messages come out and through. So that is of course possible. And I mean, to go back to my story about the negative experiences that people have cited, take for example the internet phenomenon here on YouTube that you see a lot about the quote-unquote demon. Although I do believe that this person, under my earlier outlined definitions, does qualify as an actual demon, because I've never heard of people that have had positive experiences with this being. Zozo is of course a very famous spirit. Usually spelled Z-O-Z-O or Z-O-S-O. Now, I mean, I am aware as a rock and metal fan, metalhead, that Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page has, cited this particular name, or this particular term, if you will. Now, this name has also been related to the 16th century occultist, let me see, Girolamo Cardano, because I don't have that name memorized just like that, as well as the 12th century alchemist Artephius. So in these manuscripts that they wrote, which if you do a Google search on those, you will find, it was a name for the planet Saturn, and Jimmy Page was a Capricorn, which is ruled over by Saturn. So, in that sense, it does not necessarily have to do with this particular entity. However, from all the experiences that I've heard, and when I feel out this entity, I do not get a particularly pleasant vibe from it. But that is my personal, my personal intuition on the matter, I should say. But I have heard so many horror stories of this being that if you contact him, because it feels like a very masculine energy, this being is very violent towards men. Although originally it may try to play, being your friend and being nice and stuff like that, but oftentimes it is said that this being will quickly escalate to becoming violent or making, vulgar remarks, and if you are female, it will maybe even, try to sexually assault you. It will try to do all sorts of nasty things with you and offer certain insinuations and all sorts of nasty, unpleasant stuff that you, I'm sure, want to avoid. So, there seems to be an entity that I very strongly believe with a group of spiritual followers, because I highly doubt that this entity is doing this alone and just goes, from Ouija board to Ouija board reading group, who, just want to seek a cheap thrill if they're like a couple of teenagers, if they're like on a, on a certain kind of game or whatever, or they're trying to, challenge each other. I'm very strongly convinced that this being employs basically what amounts to a small army of followers, and that they just, send out to fuck with people, if you will. So, I think that there are indeed certain dangers to the Ouija board, and let that be a very clear warning. Now, I absolutely do not think, let me strongly preface this, that the Ouija board, as mentioned earlier, because I said it is a tool and it depends on how you use it, I do not think the Ouija board in and of itself is any more or less evil than a deck of tarot cards, or a set of runes, or a set of oracle cards, or anything of the sort, really. And I really do feel that it is how you use it, and that is not just to say that you should be using it from a good moral perspective, but it is more on the follow the safety instructions kind of deal. And of course, nobody tells someone the safety instructions because most people don't know how to properly work with such divination tools, which is understandable because most people do not get taught magic. They do not get taught how to protect themselves. They do not get taught how to raise energetic barriers. They do not get taught how to make contact with helpful spirits like guides or protectors of some sort, like a spirit animal or anything of that kind of nature, or ancestors perhaps. I mean, in the Germanic traditions, we are very strong on our ancestors and calling on the whites and stuff like that. So it is of course also possible to conjure spirits and to have them protect you during such a to have them protect you during such a rite or ceremony, if you will. But again, we will be getting more into that later. With all that out of the way, I would like to give you some possible uses for and pros of using a Ouija board compared to other different methods of divination. Now, as I said, a Ouija board can be and is primarily used as a means of spirit communication and sometimes of automatic writing. It remains, it was, is, and remains a very popular tool for spiritualists, mediums, automatic writers, like I said, and other practitioners, of course, who use it to directly communicate with spirits through spelling out words, sentences, etc., in order to question spirits and other entities, in order to garner information that would otherwise not be known. So a Ouija board can therefore be a very helpful tool if, as I have repeatedly stated throughout this video, used properly and with the proper precautions. So I mean, if you seek a medium, or a tool I should say, of divination that is very concrete and that is very tangible in its results, I would definitely recommend the Ouija board. Because I mean, if you want to see certain phrases or words spelled out just by having a spirit work through you, and because I am convinced that that is how it works, I am convinced that the spirit works through you to move the planchette. I am actually, I mean, it is possible, of course, if the spirit is strong enough, if the spirit is influential enough, if it is powerful enough, that the spirit can actually move the planchette all on its own. I mean, you often see that in horror movies, but it is possible. I mean, I have had objects move in my house without somebody actually touching it. And, it is possible to see that kind of thing, but I think many spirits actually do utilize your own energy and subtly influence it in such a way that you point out these things through a very subtle manipulation of your own energy. And yes, this is indeed, as you may have guessed, potentially risky, especially if the spirit that is coming through is not trustworthy. Because by using a Ouija board, by placing your hand on that planchette, and by giving the spirits what in essence amounts to permissions, by asking these questions and using this board, you are giving them a sort of permission to utilize your energy in such a way that it is allowed to work through you to move the planchette. So I do very strongly caution against what spirits you talk about or talk to, and who you let through a Ouija board. But we will get more in depth into that in the cons of this particular topic. So, I mean, like I said, a Ouija board is a very tangible tool. It provides very concrete, observable results, and this is of course different to someone who may use, I don't know, just their sixth sense, or just their third eye, or just their clairaudience, or something like that, or their clairsentience, just to garner information that way, because there is of course a very strong possibility for bias if you are relatively untrained, or if you are uncertain of yourself, or if you have a lot of self-doubt in your metaphysical practices. And I do very strongly believe that, especially ironically for a beginner, even though I would say that a Ouija board is definitely not, for various reasons, a beginner tool, it provides a very encouraging, overt result that perhaps other methods of divination may lack. Because you may say, maybe my own subconscious is just speaking, and maybe this is just my own personal mental bias, or maybe I'm just pulling cards from a tarot deck that I want to see, or that I subconsciously am influenced to draw because I am subliminally holding negative messages. For example, if you do a reading on your love life and you deep down believe just to clarify what I mean by that. So if you are doing a reading on your love life, if, for example, and you deep down hold a very deep-seated, low self-image, and you believe that you are not worthy of love for some reason, and then you may convince yourself, okay, maybe I'm just drawing this card, this negative card that outlines something negative is going to happen in my love life, that you are subconsciously influencing that. And indeed, in a lot of cases, if you don't know how to distance yourself from such a reading, this is a possibility. It is not always the spirits talking to you. It is sometimes also your own subconscious influencing things, your own energy. I mean, make no mistake, the human psyche, the human energy is powerful. As a pagan, I am very strongly also convinced that we are equal to other spirits, perhaps not in power always necessarily, because a deity will have been around for much longer, will have gained a lot more experience and followers and all that stuff that a intermediate magician may not have. But we are, in my worldview, inherently divine souls, because as a what in essence amounts to a pantheistic animist, which is what I would call my beliefs, that is in essence what it amounts to. We are part of the Godhead, we are part of the Source, we are part of the Creator as much as it is part of us. So we have divine power within us, and it is absolutely possible that we can misuse that divine power in this particular sense, that we can negatively impact and influence our own lives. That is, of course, called manifestation. So I think a Ouija board is, of course, also possibly influenced in such a manner, but this does come down to certain preparations that I think should always be made before one does a kind of divination. Because, I mean, for example, if I cast runes, I always make sure to get myself into a trance beforehand. Like, I will sit in meditative positions for a couple minutes, listen to for me trance-inducing music, which will usually be some sort of like tribal music or something along those lines, something that has a lot of rhythm and stuff like that. But after that, I will start doing a reading so as to not have my subconscious influence things, so that I am in a position to openly receive the information that I am receiving, rather than just screwing myself over, in essence. And that is, of course, something that I do very strongly feel the Ouija board is very nice with. I do believe that the way it is set up is something that has a greater propensity for overcoming such subliminal interjection, if you will, from your own psyche. It can basically just be a very clear method of communication and divination. Plus, if you want to really piss off some hardcore religious folks, that a Ouija board is probably the way to do it, because, it has a reputation for a reason, so, hey. But, if one knows how to handle a Ouija board, it really is a very powerful and evocative tool to use, I think, in terms of divination and in terms of spirit communication, which is, of course, what divination is. I would then proceed on with the cons of a Ouija board. I would then like to outline the cons of a Ouija board. So, the cons of a Ouija board are, unfortunately, a little less clear and will require a bit more in-depth explaining, I suppose. So let me just say that the effective use of a Ouija board really does depend a great deal on the questions and methods that are used by the practitioner in question. So to give an example, in movies, you always see a group of dumb teenagers. You see these teenagers, they always sit down, they place their hands on this planchette, they never put up any sort of protection, they never do anything of this sort, they never have a care to consider what they're asking, and they always go, "Are there any spirits here?" Yeah, there probably are. I mean, there's spirits all around us, pretty much 24/7. I mean, uh, even if you think you're alone, there's probably a spirit of Joe Smo who died in the 1800s standing like 2 houses over. It's always possible that there is someone going to come through who has a benevolent intent, I suppose, but most of the time, in my experience, unless they have business with you, a neutral spirit or a spirit that would be considered quote unquote benevolent is really not going to randomly talk to Johnny and Jill because they happen to buy a Ouija board at a toy store or something, and just because they just want to fuck around with it and prove to themselves that spirits are real or something like that. So usually, if you ask a spirit like that, if you're asking a question like that, are there any spirits here? What you are in essence doing is setting an open invitation. Whoever wants to come through, please come through, make yourselves known, because I want to know if there are any spirits here. That is in essence what you are saying. The spirit world very strongly functions on contracts, and it honestly also often functions very literally. So you get what you ask for, and that is where the old adage, "Be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it," comes from. Because if you don't phrase things in a proper manner, and if you don't phrase them in an exact manner in such a way that doesn't come back to bite you in the butt later, you could potentially have disastrous consequences from a seemingly innocent question. Are there any spirits here? Okay, they're both like, I don't know, 17, 18 years old, and they may just be gathering in a graveyard as a group of friends, Okay, innocent teenage fun, cool, fine. I don't blame them, I suppose, but it's frankly a ridiculously stupid question to ask. Why would you just randomly ask, are there any spirits here? So my point is, don't do that for the reasons that I outlined. Don't ask stupid questions that you frankly don't need an answer to. I mean, if you are so uninformed as to ask, are there any spirits here? You have no business dabbling with a tool through which spirits will actually speak. And if you are so unprepared to deal with the consequences, you have no business working with this tool. And that is frankly, the case with pretty much any and all, magic contraptions, tools, whatever you want to call it. So, because make no mistake, the spirit world is not wholly benevolent. It is not, just there for your benefit. That there are nasty spirits. There are spirits who, like playing pranks. Spirits are in essence people, and there are bad living people. There are people who basically get off on, tricking people. There are those who just, want to have a laugh and just, fuck around with you a little bit because you're frankly stupid enough to ask a question like that. So, I know that sounds harsh, but it is in essence, unfortunately, what it comes down to. Don't fuck with shit you don't understand is what I'm saying, alright? So, you likely do have your, your nice spirits around you, like, your guides, your ancestors, or some of your ancestors at least, because, some of them may choose to reincarnate, you may have spirit animals, but, all these spirits, they don't really have an interest in my experience at least, in talking to you in such a blatant manner, when they have other jobs to attend to, and it is frankly usually not their job description to help you debunk or verify your suspicions on the existence of a spirit world. So, and again, that may seem harsh, but these spirits are there for a certain purpose, and they're going to do that certain purpose. And I mean, there is also the concept of them having to respect free will. So unless you ask a spirit guide or something specifically they will likely not interfere in such a direct manner in many cases. Now, of course, in some cases this does happen, but that is a whole different, scenario, a whole different ball game, a whole different topic that I really don't feel like getting into because we're talking about Ouija boards. But it is just a Ouija board is not something that you should use lightly. You really do need to think about what you're asking, and to be fair, that is something that you should be doing with divination anyway. I mean, it is, for example, a fun thing that I've learned through my years of experience with the runes. If you use runes as divination, asking questions, you'll get very literal answers. Pendulums, the same thing. So, for example, if you ask a pendulum, someone has, I don't know, put super glue on your toilet seat, okay? You suspect that it was Marcia, okay? Your friend Marcia. She likes to play a lot of practical jokes on people. Of course, not putting super glue on your toilet seat is kind of messed up, but I mean, just to cite a random example. Okay, so you have super glue on your toilet seat, you sit down on it, you didn't notice it, and you try to get up, and that doesn't go so well. So you suspect Marcia because she's known for this kind of shit, but it really was your little brother Billy who did it, okay? It was Marcia's idea, all right. It was Marcia's idea, all right. You got that part right. But if you ask a pendulum, was Marcia the one who put super glue on my toilet seat? The pendulum's gonna say no. Now, it was Marcia's idea, but she let your little brother Billy do it, okay? So if you then ask, was Marcia involved with this somehow, some way, some shape or form, it will say yes. And you were like, yeah, but why did you not say, yes to the previous question? Because Marcia didn't actually put the super glue on the toilet, and that was the specific question you asked. So, it's a really stupid example, I get it, but I'm hoping that the intent of what I'm trying to illustrate here is clear. Be very cautious and very specific in what you want answers to. Ask multiple targeted questions. You need to be very specific and precise and concise. Ideally, you are concise in what you are asking. So if you are interviewing Jimmy from 1950, okay, you know that Jimmy is apparently a kid that's like, I don't know, 12 years old, and he died because he drowned in the lake by your house or something like that, okay? And you want to interview this kid, and you just go like, so what year did you die? 1950. Okay, awesome. Very, very short question, short, concise, easy answer. Okay. Now, if you start asking him like, I don't know, did someone murder you? Again, short question, short answer. Yes. Okay. Who murdered you? Babysitter. Okay. All right. Easy enough. Babysitter murdered Jimmy. All right. So, okay. Can you describe us the exact circumstances under which, your babysitter murdered you? And then it's going to have to spell out an entire fucking sentence. But what will likely happen is it's going to spell out drowning, because that's easier. I mean, it does take a spirit effort to move a physical object. It does require many spirits, and certainly a spirit that is a 12-year-old child, it's going to not have enough energy to throw shit around the house most of the time, because it no longer has a physical body, and thus no longer has the influence to physically manipulate physical objects. So, I mean, it's usually stronger spirits, and oftentimes you will hear about this in, hauntings and stuff like that, where shit will get thrown around the house. Yeah, that's logical, because those spirits will have probably been fed a lot of energy by being given a lot of attention, and therefore that raises their stature, that raises their status, it raises their energy, it raises their capabilities, because in essence what you're doing by being afraid of it is giving it power, and therefore you're just emboldening it, empowering it, and strengthening it, and thus it's able to more easily influence stuff around you. So that is also something that you need to consider. The strength of the spirit that you're trying to communicate with needs to be taken into consideration. How easily is it able to come through? Are there other negative spirits in the surrounding area that may want to pretend to be a particular spirit that you are trying to contact? Could such a being easily, subdue another spirit and then take its place in a game of pretend? Just to fuck with you, or to try to gain a foothold in your household so that it can start wreaking havoc, so that it can start developing its own energy, so that it can be fed fear, that it can be fed other kinds of negative energy, because that brings us into a very different area again, which is not directly related to Ouija boards, because that brings us into the area of, again, hauntings, and of how energy works, and how energy is transferred from one being to another, and all that kind of stuff. But these are all things that you need to consider and be very careful of. I mean, divination is a dangerous thing if you don't know what you're doing. And even if you know what you're doing, it can sometimes be risky depending on how you are feeling, how well are your protections currently, are you feeling sick? Probably don't do divination unless it's absolutely necessary and you are willing to take the risk. Are you low on energy for whatever reason? Are you exhausted, super stressed out, overworked? Because all these things contribute to your own defenses being let down. It will make it more easy for a spirit that is coming through such a device or such a tool to, start influencing you or start influencing things around you. Have you, considered that who you are talking to is actually the right person to ask questions of? Do you want to speak to your grandma, who was said to be a very powerful witch, and do you want to learn certain secrets or knowledge from her? Okay, then go talk to your grandma, who was a powerful witch, and who, if she hasn't reincarnated yet at that point, will want to divulge such secrets. Is she even willing to do so? Ask such things first. Do not immediately, start asking or start demanding shit. Know how to approach a spirit. Know their personality. Get to know them. Stuff like that. But do not just randomly ask, for example, if you want to, study runes. Are there any spirits nearby who can teach me runes? Why would you do that? Who knows who this spirit is? Who are they? Where are they from? What credentials do they have? Stuff like that. It's really all this kind of stuff that you do need to be cautious of, because the spirit world does contain, like the physical does, like the physical realms do, a lot of tricksters, a lot of people who frankly don't have your best interest in mind, and who, again, either want to just, fuck with you, who either want to, fuck with you, or who want to just, cause harm, or, feed off of the negativity that they may potentially start causing at some point, or for whatever reason. And not only that, you will need to verify, like I said, the identity of a spirit, but this, of course, will require you to hone your third eye. This will require you to probably engage in a lot of meditation, to develop your sixth sense, to develop any and or all of the clair abilities, clairsentience, clairvoyance, clairnasiance, clairtangency, and whatever else have you, to be able to accurately assess if the spirit that you are talking to or the spirits that are around you are in any way, shape, or form actually trustworthy. And that is another thing that I would like to tell you. That is a potential, hazard. Trust your gut. If you ignore your feelings of like the spirit that I'm talking to right now, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel trustworthy. And I'm talking like really trust your gut. Don't trust this, but just trust the gut. Because there is, of course, a difference of like, oh shit, there's actually a spirit moving this fucking thing around. Holy shit, I'm scared, I gotta end this. Yeah, okay, but this is what you wanted, right? You started engaging with a Ouija board. What the fuck did you expect? So that is another thing. There's a difference between your mind, your heart, and your gut feeling. You have to really learn how to differentiate all this. You have to really learn how to, hone your intuition and all that. So, and at that point, if you have gotten that far where you can safely tell, which spirit is trustworthy and which spirit is not, and, you can basically communicate with spirits through feelings, through emotions, or other clair input somehow, would you even need a Ouija board at that point? So, I realize that it sounds like I see more cons with the Ouija board specifically than I do pros, but that's frankly really not the case. It's more like this is a basic rundown of cautions that you should always have when it comes to divination, period. So, please do keep all these things in mind, though. Please do remember to be safe, is what I'm saying. Be sure to check out your sources. Be sure to check out who you're talking with in some way, shape, or form. And to that end, I would like to give you the list that I mentioned earlier as a final part of this video. So, how I would recommend that you safely use a Ouija board. And again, I am of course aware that a lot of people who watch this video may or may not just be curious about the topic of Ouija boards, or that they may just be, looking for information on it or stuff like that, and that they may not be practitioners of magic, of, spirituality in that sense of, doing the kind of thing that I do, working in the occult in various ways. As an active, I would almost say profession, side job, spiritual calling, whatever you have, because I definitely do consider it a calling in my personal case. But, if you're just someone who's curious about it, if you're just someone who is either interested in working with it or playing around with it or fiddling with it a little bit, I am gonna have to stress a couple things that you may or may not like hearing if you really, really want to work with this thing as safely as possible. My first step is that you should definitely think about who you want to contact. Have a reason for wanting to initiate contact with somebody. Don't, as I mentioned earlier in my little rant about, movie quotes where it's basically like, are there any spirits here? Yes, there are, and probably the ones that are going to respond to you are likely not going to be nice because... So, let me ask you a question. If some random idiot in the middle of a street, and it's... Consider that you are a spirit, okay, and there are literally dead people, non-human spirits, etc., all around you, okay? So consider that a busy spirit street, if you will. So what would you do if a random person, a living human, in the middle of the street that you're walking on, starts yelling, "Are there any people here?" Well, yeah. Who is this idiot? Why is he shouting? Are there any people here? It's the same thing. Most people are just gonna look at you like this, and they're just gonna keep moving. And it's the same with spirits. Most people who have no business with you, they're just gonna ignore you because you have nothing to give them. They have nothing to give you. The ones that are gonna react to it are really just gonna be trolls, basically. and I mean metaphorical trolls, as in like internet trolls, not as in like actual trolls. But it's really something that you have to really think about. Why am I contacting a person? What do I want to ask them? For what reasons am I opening conversation and portals and exposing myself to this particular spirit? And what do I hope to gain out of it? And maybe even what do I hope to give them in return? Because that is something that you do have to understand. I mean, if you want something from a spirit, especially if they don't know you, what are you going to give them? I mean, are you going to give them, like an offering, incense? Are you going to give them a candle as a gesture? I mean, it is basically, in essence, relationship building that you are going to be doing if you are going to seek to speak to a particular spirit. And certainly don't expect a deity to come through a Ouija board or something like that. There are other ways of communicating with deities, or projections of deities, or avatars or stuff like that, if you will. But that is a whole different ballgame. Won't be getting into that. So, I mean, it is really something that you do need to consider. Why am I talking to this being? So secondly, think of the kind of questions that you're going to ask. Write down a list of questions, bring it with you into the ritual, and also have a piece of writing utensil with you, like a pen or pencil or something like that. And have a second piece of paper with you as well, is what I would recommend if you actually do enter the ritual, the rite, the ceremony, the seance, whatever you want to call it. And you want to, maybe write down follow-up questions as a result of certain answers that they give you. You will also want to, of course, because it's going to be spelled out one letter at a time, you will want to have an extra piece of paper to write down answers in such a manner or maybe leave enough space on your initial, document that you have written down, to leave space to actually record the answers. So, the third part, the third thing is, like I said, grab a piece of paper, something to write with, record the answers. If you are doing this for the first few times, I would absolutely recommend doing this not just by yourself. Do it with a couple of people who are, like you, genuinely interested in, facilitating communications with a spirit, or spirits, plural. And why do I say that? It will help create a feeling of safety. It will help create a feeling of, bonding. It will help create a feeling of, there is, if you are very new to this and you may feel a modicum of fear, which, by the way, I do recommend that you try to strip that away as much as possible before you actually go into the ritual, because that will negatively impact things, and it will, for certain, be much more likely to draw in entities who may seek to, increase that fear, who may seek to work with it, who may seek to enhance that fear, who may just seek to, exploit that in various different ways. So what I would do is, before you also enter the ritual, have a group of people, maybe meditate, calm yourselves down, and go in there. And it certainly will also help to, have someone else there just to record the responses, so that one of you can focus on actually asking the questions and, having the planchette do its thing, and then have the other person record the answers, because that way it will simply go quicker, it will go more smoothly, things will be less interrupted, and one person can basically function as the channel through which stuff works. So fourthly, create a protective space before you actually even so much as utter a word to that fucking board. Okay, create a protective space. I cannot stress this enough. Have your spirits and or magical wards and barriers in place. And this is what I meant earlier when I said you may not like hearing this. I would recommend that one does not work with a Ouija board unless and until one knows how to establish, at the very least, basic protection magics, wards, shields, etc. Ideally, you will also want to have a group or a team of spirits who are, proven to be by your side, on your side, to help protect you, to filter out any and all unwelcome guests that may pretend to be a person that you are contacting, or that may, pretend to be kind and benevolent and nice. Which we on the physical plane may not always be able to as easily spot or detect, but someone who is on that plane of existence that a spirit that would come through would be much more easily able to tell, much like you would be able to tell, an individual who is, up to no good. Basically, you can often see it in their body language, in the way that they speak. In their eyes, the vibes that you get from them. And by the way, vibes, that is your intuition at work. So trust that. And again, distinctly, separate intuition from the fearful mind. So, ideally, if you are a practitioner already, you will want to create a sanctuary of sorts, I suppose. Or if you already have a sanctuary, a ritual space, which you normally already have to, basically, from where you practice magic normally, you will want to perform a seance in such an area, or perhaps you may want to, create a dedicated space for it if you are so inclined. So, fifthly, make sure that your space is cleansed and neutralized, and I mean neutralized in the most literal sense of the word. I don't mean like, killed off or destroyed or like a hostile neutralized kind of thing. No, I mean just neutralized, because that's what smudging does. It neutralizes energy in a particular area. That is what smudging is for. And no, it doesn't work to permanently kick out demons, if that's what you're wondering, but I will be getting into that in a different video. At least not permanently. It may potentially help to get rid of them in the short term. But, so anyway, you will want to do that. You will want to, use either incense or sage or some other kind of substance that has, in whatever your spiritual convictions are, proven to, enhance and purify the atmosphere and energy in a particular space, your ritual space in this case particularly. For the sixth point, I would say ask your protective spirits. Program your protective magics to only let through spirits that are specifically invited by you and or people you are working with during this ceremony. And in that sense, I would also say appoint one person, the presider, or the head of the ceremony, if you will, so that only one person is in charge of who gets let through and who is being called forth at a given time, so that you do not have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people shouting at the same time to let through Uncle Billy, and then have another let through Uncle Jimmy, and blah 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 blah, because that's going to be fucking chaotic really fucking fast, and you will have already lost control at that point. So seventh point is that I would ask your questions, write down the responses, do your thing. So basically at that point you are engaging in the actual ceremony, the actual seance, etc. Eighthly, I would politely thank the spirits for their answers, bid the spirits or spirit goodbye, and make sure that the planchette moves to goodbye. Okay? The ritual should not be considered closed until the planchette moves to goodbye. So that is something that you often hear, and I am for once in absolute agreement with it. Why? Because it finalizes the ritual, it gives everybody a sense of closure, it gives more of a will and intent being put forth of this ritual is now over. What do I do in the event that a spirit refuses to say goodbye? Well, in that case, that's why I'm saying good that you have your protections in place. You will have to take matters into your own hands, in the sense that you will want to just start kicking them out. Forcefully if necessary. You will want to forcefully close the portal. You will forcefully want to end the ritual. If necessary, you will just move the planchette to goodbye, tell the spirit to leave, and make sure that you perform cleansing ceremonies and other rituals to banish unwanted and unwelcome spirits. In this case, the spirit that is refusing to leave of its own accord. Which is again why I say make sure that you know at least basics of magic, which includes banishing rituals and stuff like that. As I said, for the 9th step, you will want to ritually close any portals that have opened as a result of you inviting the spirits. Make sure that you pay attention to the board itself. Make sure that you cleanse it. Make sure that you cleanse your space again. And that basically concludes the ritual. So make sure that you do all these steps every time that you do use this board, because if you fail to close a portal, if you fail to end the ceremony or ritual properly, this could have potentially disastrous consequences. Leaving a portal open, unless you are leaving it open for a particular reason, is of course never a good thing, a smart thing. You are literally just leaving your front door wide open, basically, in a spiritual sense, for any random, Joe Smo to come through, and that's probably going to be bad. Because the only people that are going to blatantly walk into your house when the front door is open are people who are not going to respect your privacy, and they're probably there to steal some shit or to do some sort of harm. So please be cautious with that. And as should be clear, I recommend overall a very cautious approach with the Ouija board, because it does have a reputation for a reason, and that is unfortunately not just chalked up to teenagers playing around in graveyards after they had a couple beers and asking stupid questions. It is a genuine tool that is in essence functioning as a sort of portal for spirits through which they can come through, or at the very least influence you and or your buddies and or your surroundings, etc., etc. And that is why I do not recommend working with a Ouija board unprotected. You will want to have a safe ritual space constructed beforehand that you properly also dismantle afterwards, after everything is said and done, to work with this tool in a practical manner and in such a manner that you can get the most use out of it. So that is all I have to say about the Ouija board. It is not something I personally work with a lot. I personally think it's just not up my alley, really. I mean, I may explore it a bit further sometimes because I feel like it somewhere in the near future. But I don't really have a reason to work with it personally. I mean, I use, like I said, other divination methods like rune casting, like pendulums, other stuff like that, like a black mirror, like I mentioned, and all sorts of other divination methods that I could potentially use that appeal to me a little more than the Ouija board does. Please do keep that in mind. Make sure that you are safe when practicing with this tool, and be sure that you do so with a free and open mind. But that does not mean that you shouldn't also have a guarded mind. So use prudence, use caution, use common sense, and you will be absolutely more than fine in using this. And if you are unsure of your ability to work with this tool, if you are having some doubts on whether you are ready for it, then the answer is probably don't until you do. So that is all I have to say on the Ouija board. Thank you so much for watching. Help.